Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On this episode, I want to talk about a couple of the prevailing trends that go on in social media, a place that is ultimately dominated by females. I want to talk about places like Twitter, Instagram, Alt, Collar Me, FetLife, especially the places that are being used outside of the mainstream places, and then the outside of mainstream places such as alt.com or Collar Me or FetLife, where the BDSM community goes and sometimes to meet others, discuss events, discuss types of scenes. All of these things come into these different places, but the one prevailing trend that goes on there especially is influencing. This contextualized belief where obviously in places like Instagram and Twitter or Facebook or now TikTok that people are getting paid for recommending stuff just because they've made a bunch of videos and they have a bunch of followers. When it comes to the BDSM community, though, there is a difference in the prevalence that we look at a bunch of different trends that are going on and we put ourselves out there. We make posts where, for example, like I write about different topics, or people will take photos. They'll talk about their polyamory. They will talk about their rope skills or masochism or sadism. But for one thing is that I'm really certain that what I really want to talk about is self-sexualization, self-objectification, victimhood, ultimately. And all of these things are kind of wrapped together. Objectification obviously is unhealthy for any society. As we have a male-dominated society that's driven by male economics, although the trend has now changed. 80% of households in the United States, about 58% globally, the decisions in the household of what to purchase and what to buy are made by women. However, when it comes to objectifying, we still have a problem with the society where, I've personally never seen it, but catcalling, yelling at women, I don't understand this type of behavior. I've never done it myself. I personally have never seen it. Obviously, women report about it or being looked at just solely for their looks, disavowing their intelligence. It does go on. But inside of that, as the evolution of female empowerment has come around, we have then seen self-sexualization, so monetizing themselves for the simplistic fact of making gains on their looks. There's nothing wrong with that. Models do it. We've been doing it in advertising for as long as magazines and everything else has been around. In the BDSM community, it's a little bit different, though, when we look at these websites, when we look at these places where they're posting photos, and we're kind of cross-mixing that with, I'm an exhibitionist. And I'm putting myself on display because I want to put myself on display. Great. So you've now moved into the realm of sexualizing yourself. Nothing wrong with it. This is why we come there. It's an expressional form of who we are, although there are some debates on places like Alt or places like FetLife that have slowly moved that marker of what is or what is not really into the BDSM community. I'm not here to discuss that, though, or at least not on this episode. But what ends up happening is that as the BDSM community has washed itself over a few times, and it's obviously constantly evolving, we have moved into this moment where, obviously, if you look at a place like FetLife, you can go and probably the top 10, 20, maybe 30 users just to follow alone. They're all women. Nothing wrong with that. Congratulations to them. Whether they're making money on it or not, no idea. I think quite a few of them have their OnlyFans accounts. Different discussion for a different day. They're there. They're monetizing themselves. They're self-objectifying themselves. And that's fine. They're capitalizing. But inside of these posts, inside of these photographs or these things that they write, the majority of them being photographs, therein lies this intertwined grain and connectedness to victimhood. And this is really where I have a problem with all of this. Because the problem is that, look, if you want to go out there, it is your right. You want to place photos on social media. Once they are out there for good. All of these little disclaimers we put on of our profiles of, you can't, these are my personal, none of that even works. And if you look into social media law, it's very, very difficult to prosecute that, let alone take to a civil action. So once you really put your things out in the, internet sphere, they're gone and they're there for life and they become very difficult to take down. Again, I don't want to digress too much. What I see in a lot of these posts from women, predominantly, is that they will make their posts that are enticing. They will do engagement. And the posts can range from the very tame to the overtly and explicit sexualized nature of what they are asking for. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. All the power to them. Some women embrace this fact. The problem is that obviously now in our culture, especially after the Me Too movement, we are trying to say, in one respect all women. Respect ourselves, treat each other with dignity. I did a podcast not too long ago about the discussion of discourse and how it is a paramount and it's a formulaic foundation to civilization. Without civil discourse, we don't have a society. Again, I don't want to digress too much. But as we now have moved into these new eras and where we are talking about self-empowerment, self-sexualization, monetizing ourselves, so we are taking control back. They are inherently still a lie. And I'll tell you why. Because you're still counting on a consumer to buy your product because you've decided to sell yourself. You're counting on somebody else's money to pay you. You're counting on enticing, for the most part, men to spend hundreds of dollars a month on your product, which is yourself. So you're lowering your standards. You are dropping and saying, this is what I'm worth. I am worth $2.95 for a photograph. That's my self-worth. Because you've objectified yourself, but yet we're still placing all of the onus on men. It is a combined problem. It's not just a male problem. It's not just solely a female problem. It is an our problem. For us to work on it, to fix it, I don't have that solution. What I do know is that we have to kind of come to some sort of generalized agreement. But what I start to see is then that women and I have called this behavior out before, they will heavily engage in their audience. And there's one user from Europe. I won't go any more specific than that. But this one particular person wrote this scathing post about being objectified and being called names and didn't like the responses she was receiving from obviously overwhelmingly men. Fair enough. We should still have some sort of decorum. BDSM's main foundations, besides consent, is respect. And that's just a part of the human condition, right? Consent doesn't always have to, it has to be a part of two people's lives, but what should be is respect, right? Trust, we earn it. But when I decided to kind of take a further stance, because, I remember when this post was written, and there's hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands, of these posts on social media in these places, like Collar Me, like Alt, like FetLife. What we start to see are these crossover runs. So, look at me, desire me, want me, buy my product. For example, to use very strong verbiage. Some of them, again, some of the posts I've seen are very innocuous and they still get sexualized. Some people laugh it off. I don't agree with it because those people who are responding in that manner denote people that don't have a lot of understanding within the lifestyle. They don't seem to grasp the basic concepts of the tenements that are the foundations to what BDSM is. So they've reduced themselves. They've come into a world they don't really understand, and they see all these women, they see all this imagery, they see men putting up videos of themselves with women or their partners or whomever, and they believe everything that they're seeing. What a lot of people tend to forget is that this is created. It's not this way all the time. A lot of this imagery is just that. It's just imagery. It's to fulfill a fantastical view, to fulfill a fantasy. But we can't move past that because our regular lives, or as those in the BDSM community refer to it as the vanilla lives, they're very plain and mundane. So it's not that people in the vanilla world don't have their own fantasies and desires and beliefs and sexual wants, but they tend to be a lot more tame compared to those in the BDSM and fetish community. With that being said, what we're looking at then is, when I go back to the story, is this: as I started to look through, and she was complaining that men were saying these things to her and calling her these names, calling her horrible names, which boggled me. I don't understand. We wouldn't do that in public, so the anonymity of the internet provides people a conduit to be abhorrent. Abhorrent's one of my favorite words. A psychologist I highly respect and regard uses that word. But it's abhorrent behavior. We're dehumanizing people. We're reducing them to less. So, to play the devil's advocate, I decided to look at some of her photographs. I think she had about 100 and, I don't know, just for sake of argument, it's about 120 photos. So I went through all of the photographs, and of the 120 photographs, about 68%, she requested some sort of engagement from her audience, asked them questions. These were all highly sexualized questions, meaning, what would you do to me? How would you have sex with me? How would you use X, Y, and Z? In about 32% or 30% of the photos that I had found, she had, towards herself, had degraded herself, spoke ill of herself. Now, I get it, this is a persona, but it becomes difficult for the layperson to understand, especially when they're entering this world, and this goes for both men and women alike, when they're both entering BDSM, and this is what they see, and it's not just one user doing it. You open up these websites, it is post after post after post, and picture after picture, or video after video. People are inundated with it. This affects our behavior. This affects how we think, how we feel, how we react. Not long after that incident, and so I called her out on the behavior. I said, I agree that the behavior you're receiving in kind is ridiculous and it shouldn't be, but in turn, when you put forth these things, when you ask these sexualized questions, when you ask for engagement, and then you turn around and you pile on top of that, you degrade yourself, you play into their sexualized fantasies. And then finally, to capitulate it all, you wrap yourself in victimhood. Well, that's ridiculous behavior, because you're doing it to yourself. No one told you to go to these places. No one stuck a phone in your hand when you were 2 years old. Some of you maybe, but no one told you to start posting your images online. Then they also go, oh, well, it becomes a sword and a shield. I want to be an exhibitionist, and I want to do these things, and I want to say these sexualized things, and I want to engage my audience for whatever that really means in the BDSM community. I want everybody to look at me, which is then attention-seeking behavior, because it's what it is, and most people acknowledge it. I would also, on top of it, it's got very veiled and very thin and veiled looks of being narcissistic. But that notwithstanding, you use this, I'm self-empowered, I'm going to objectify myself, I'm going to be self-sexualized by myself, I'm going to appreciate my own body, and I'm going to ask you to appreciate my body. But the moment you do, and the moment you say something I don't agree with, because now, I've asked you how you would like to have sex with me, and you told me something I didn't want to hear, I will now put up my shield and claim I'm a victim. And then when I'm called out on my victimhood, I will take out my sword and I will wrap myself in exhibitionism. It's almost like we don't seem to understand what we are doing, and it's not only pervasive to the community that we're in now, and it's demonstrative for those entering the lifestyle, but it's psychologically harmful for the people that are already in and are already doing this behavior. Because not only do they have to get to a point where, if they've already enticed their audience with very seductively clothed pieces, that are tastefully and artistically done, that's fine. But eventually they'll start getting the requests to become nude, and the pressure will become mounting. And there are studies after studies talking about this, that eventually these people they come to a decision. I will either cave and end up starting to show more skin. It's almost like blackmail, and I'll get to that in a moment. Or I will stand and stay my course, and I will just keep doing my artistic photos in whatever capacity they are, and keep it on that level. For those that cave to almost like the blackmail type taunts, what ends up happening is it's no longer good enough. They gave an inch, so now everybody's going to be taking a mile. Oh, well, now you've showed me your chest. Well, come on, what kind of, and they insert whatever expletive you want here about being derogative towards somebody, and they will dogpile this pressure. So now they'll go from removing their chest, and they might still be wearing underwear, for example, and they will do a more suggestive post, and then that's not enough, and it no longer satiates the need until the consumer of this product has driven the producer to the point that they claimed once they first started doing this, they were no longer going to cross. But you still have to understand, by entering this world, by doing these things, you have to realize at a point that it may get there. If not, you're in denial and you're lying to yourself. You're causing your own self-harm. And then you want to blame others when it happens. That's unhealthy behavior. You have to realize, especially because we are in a community in which BDSM often gets confused that because we're involved in this, that it's about sex. BDSM and sex are not synonymous. I've had this discussion before. They're not. But you can get to a point where just because you're being an exhibitionist, you can rule your realm and claim it back in. There are some users that I have had conversations with on various platforms. This one woman, she's like, I don't care. I come here for the fantasy. I take none of it seriously. There's no harm in it for me. I like the dirty talk, and then when I log off, I log off. No one contacts me. I can't contact them. I'm fine. Fair enough. I had a conversation after this incident last year with a new user who was dating a veteran. She had initially contacted me because I'd written something about veterans and was curious about her boyfriend, and so I gave her some passing advice. And we eventually got into the discussion about her perceptions of the lifestyle being brand new, and she told me then that her belief was, well, everybody's got to be naked, everybody has got to be putting their lives online, I got to show what I'm like when I'm showering and shaving, because that's what BDSM is. And that's not what the community is. Not at all. We're starting to pass these lessons on. And it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. Because then while we're happy to say it's always men's fault. And I would pretty much agree, it's male dominated. I mean, men want to see these things, sure. But if women also didn't do it, then there's nothing to see. The need then dies down. No one tells women they have to get into a magazine, just like no one tells men they have to get in. They do so because they want to be seen. So how do we break the cycle? Well, that's a different discussion. When I talk about self-sexualization, what I'm really referring to is the intentional engaging in activities that are expressly designed to appear more sexually appealing. So if you've been to any of these websites, you would know that looking at them, right there, that's the behavior that's going on. And when we keep doing these things, we're not going to get to the point where, oh, I demand respect, but I want you to look at a picture of me fully nude and then tell me what you want to do to me because at this very moment I need to have my needs met. And then turn around and blame those people. We are creating a community that's literally fighting amongst itself. We're bashing each other because we want to be objectified. We don't want to be objectified. We can't figure out if we even know what the definition of objectification is. But then you want to sexualize it so you can monetize it. And when someone pushes that boundary that you've asked them to push, then you want to raise your shield of victimhood. Now that's creating a lot of confusion within the lifestyle. It's creating a lot of arguments. It creates a lot of unhealthy discussions. It creates a lot of anxiety, animosity, anger. And then we look to blame. So, of course, one set of blame is we blame the person who's doing it. Right? We'll blame the user for putting out their quote-unquote content. I hate that word. I really do. For these users to produce their quote-unquote content, the reality is that they're relying on their looks and sometimes barely their intelligence. Because for the most part, when I look at these people, they seem to lack a lot of it. And that's everywhere. I'm not just talking about the BDSM community. I'm talking about influencers in general. I mean, to be honest with you, to me, it's not a job at all. I have more respect for somebody working at McDonald's 9 to 5 than I do for content creators. Especially for those who charge. I don't charge anything for my stuff. When I write, when I produce my podcast, it's all free. There's no ads. I don't do any of that. I've already started having offers. I'm not going to, at least not for the foreseeable future. But the reality is you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, I want you to look at me. I want you to idolize me. I want you to lust after me. I want you to desire me. I want you to dream of me. I want you to consider having sex with me. I want you to consider using me. I want to pose a question to you, and I want you to say all of these things to me. And then in the flip side, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you turn around and these users then go ahead and blame their people for responding to them in a manner that they don't like, that they then, oh my gosh, oh, so-and-so said this to me. I'm in shock. I'm a victim. It's not going to work. I don't know what it's going to take to get them to stop doing that, but it's twofold. First, we have to start raising men with respect and morals the way we used to be. Just because we are in the lifestyle, that doesn't mean we cannot be respectful. As a dominant in 20 years within the lifestyle, I have always started, when I contact somebody, it's always a greeting or a hello to them. I ask very pointed and specific questions after I've read through kind of what their profiles or whatever it has on their feed about them, because I want to get to know them. If they respond, wonderful. If they don't, fine. That's fine. It's only me. Now, I know there's actually quite a few people that also do this as well. There are those, though, coming into the lifestyle, none of that even matters. They will talk to people the way that they are talking to the opposite sex, and it does go both ways. Obviously, it's more prevalent in men than it is women, but they will talk to them in a degrading manner because Why? What's the perception? They're seeing all of this behavior going on, and they believe this is the way you communicate. So it is a twofold issue, and you can't have all of it and then wrap yourself up in between victimhood and exhibition and say you're being objectified while you're self-objectifying yourself while you're really self-sexualizing yourself. It's not going to work. We have to consider as a community as a whole, if we were going to do this, if we're going to wrap ourselves in the exhibition category, and I'm really thinking that's probably going to start talking about that in my next podcast, especially as I'm starting to see quote-unquote exhibitionists that are now taking this exhibitionism public. That is actually part of a paraphilic disorder. In most places, it's a crime. But again, the majority of the people doing that, overwhelmingly, are women. Showing their breasts, showing their vaginas, going on trains and masturbating, going on airplanes. I hate to tell you, nobody wants to see that, and frankly, it's a crime. Again, I don't want to digress too much because I'm going outside of what I'm talking about here. But the reality is, we're caught in this conundrum, and then the community's caught in this conundrum, or this small portion of the community. And it's going to be a cycle that's going to stick. Because until everybody wants to change their behavior, no one's going to change it. No one's going to dismiss what's happening. So, my ultimate problem with it, looking at it, is the people that eventually that I end up talking to that are seeking help because they don't know how to deal with the pressure, the anxiety, the stress, the depression that comes with all of this. I want to be looked at. I want to be idolized. I want to have my endorphins raised and my serotonin levels up, because when I log on after I posted my 9th picture of the day today, spreading my legs, I want to make sure there's at least 2,000 loves or likes or comments on my photo, and I get depressed when that doesn't happen. And these are real reactions. But to break that cycle of attention-seeking behavior becomes a very long process, because you have to learn to substitute and learn to self-gratify and learn to appreciate yourself first, outside of the need and appreciation of anyone else. But if you're going to continue down this saga and down this line, and you're going to continue this thinking, it only ends up creating a hostile environment. We then no longer look at each other anymore. We keep the commodity aspect open. Then women who have learned to monetize themselves, while we're claiming empowerment, we're still hurting future generations, both men and women. The men who are looking at this and they're buying this are perpetuating the cycle. The women who are monetizing it and making money from it are only telling other young girls that, guess what? This is your value. This is your worth to men. This is all you're ever going to amount to. That's not true in any one form. And I can think of that for a myriad of reasons, from prime ministers to lawyers to doctors who do far more good in this world. We have to learn to treat each other with a modicum of respect. We have to learn to get back to communicating and talking. But we have to learn that if we are going to objectify ourselves, if we are going to sexualize ourselves, that then turning around and claiming to be a victim of all of these things because we're doing these things isn't going to go hand in hand. It looks ridiculous. It's also dehumanizing to the people that are actually victims of sexual violence or sexual acts. Those people truly didn't ask for any of that type of behavior to happen to them or go on. These people, in all of these instances I'm talking about, did. As a matter of fact, they're encouraging it. What I have noticed over time is, as their rise of goes, as all of this attention-seeking behavior keeps trying to clamor on for the next post, for the next thing that they do or say or picture that they post, what ends up happening over time is this exhaustion sets in, because it's never enough. Once you gain that adoration, it's never enough. Is that it becomes mentally exhausting. There are no breaks anymore. Your private life isn't private. People want to find out who you are, which apparently one user found out recently when she was stalked online. Inappropriate behavior, terrible, disgusting behavior. I hope that person is safe. But this is what it leads to. We start leading ourselves down the path of other unhealthy behavior. We invite the door of other people who are unhealthy into our lives, because we don't know the people that we're connecting with on the other side of the computer. But unfortunately, sometimes those other people can't differentiate the difference between reality and fantasy. And that's where we end up at. I don't have an answer. I'm not angry about any of this. I know I've gotten some questions about this. So I'm misogynistic. No, I'm not. None of that. My generalized concern is actually for the good of the community as a whole. That means the women within the community just as much as men. But we have to start taking accountability. And that's my other problem is when we start displacement of blame. The only person doing these things is you. If you're not going to hold yourself accountable, then no one else will or can. And you're going to be left to your own devices. As a community, we should want more. At least accept the world that we're living in without blaming everybody else for it. We make our own choices. We make our own decisions. You don't owe anybody anything, and they don't owe you anything. But the reality is going to end up being that if we keep going down this line, we're going to just remain in a world and in a place that's going to be completely isolated. Trying to make money off the very people that we despise. Well, that's never going to work out. And maybe we need to do some reflecting on that. And as I got told in from a commenter about my last podcast, I'm being a little bit idealistic when I think that we can change behaviors, but that's exactly what I try to help do in my job. Help change patterns of behaviors. If we don't recognize these patterns, take accountability for our own actions, and start to move forward, we're never going to make anything better. Especially for a community that we all care about and we live in and play in and take part of. We have to want more from it. We have to want more from each other and for ourselves. And maybe that's the thing we need to start considering. Until next time, everyone, be safe and stay keen.